are being recorded.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Thomas Ayers, and welcome to the Spirit Gathering teleconference. Today is June the 18th, 2013. Our topic this evening is devotion to God, and I'm very happy that you've joined us for this teleconference. We are recording this call so people who could not be here tonight can listen to it later. When you're not speaking, though, please press either your phone's mute button or the *6 to mute your line to help keep noise to a minimum. Tonight we'll meet as a conversation council, and what that means is that you may speak at any time, but just take care to let the current speaker finish before you begin. One of the great features of Pure Spirit Style Circle is the pause, which we can use as a resource to open space to reflect upon what is unfolding with us at the moment. Amy Skizis will serve as our guardian for pauses tonight, ringing a chime for the pause if needed or when you ask for it. When her chime or bell is sounded, we stop talking, and the person who called for the pause explains the reason why. And then the guardian rings the chime again, and then we resume our discussion. Diane will be the timekeeper for tonight, and she will sound the time every 10 or 15 minutes or so, depending on the pace of our discussion, to help remind us of how we're doing with time. So let's take a moment now to get settled, to center ourselves, to let go of the events of this day, and begin to enter the sacred space within ourselves. Let's imagine that we're joining together, sacred heart to sacred heart, with every other person on this call right now. And let's imagine that we're joining together in a circle with a light or a flame or a fire in the center. And then send a ray of light from your heart to that flame in the center and to everyone on the call tonight or to who listens in later. And now we're connected, sacred heart to sacred heart. Let's set our intentions now. And here are 4 intentions. We listen to one another with compassion and curiosity. We ask for what we need and offer what we can. We deepen our connection with one another and with the divine. And may this sharing serve us, our communities, and the planet. And so shifting now to the topic for this evening's discussion, I was just kind of minding my own business and in an email discussion to Bishop Amy on another subject. The question of devotion came up, and she invited me to lead a discussion on devotion and the kind of generic things to look at as a way of beginning, as a way of starting, and certainly not a way of limiting our discussion, are questions like these. What does devotion to God or the divine or the Great Spirit or the Goddess or the Tao, choose whatever name you want for it, what does that sort of devotion look like and feel like in your life? How do you experience devotion? And or what is your devotion made of? So this is a way to begin a discussion. but I would like to offer a reading on, you might say, one interpretation of what devotion looks like and feels like and can end up being like. And I'd like to read a passage from a book called The Rays in Esoteric Psychology. And in it is a quotation, a passage from Swami Vivekananda, who lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s in India. He's one of the first gurus in India, actually, to speak and teach in English. He made many trips to the United States and had a lot of influence in this country in the early part of the 1900s. But he wrote in English, and here's the passage I like to offer. And it's about Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion. So to quote, love of the pleasures of the senses and of the intellect is all made dim and thrown aside and cast into the shade by the love of God. That love of God grows and assumes a form called para bhakti, or supreme devotions. And in supreme devotion, forms vanish, rituals fly away, books are superseded, images, temples, churches, religions and sects, countries and nationalities, all these little limitations and bondages fall away naturally from the person who knows this love of God. So, again, in the spirit of the Conversation Council, I'd like to open up the forum, the floor, the circle for us to talk about and share your experience of devotion. And anyone who would like, please feel free to begin.
15 minutes has passed.
Thank you.
I'll jump in. With part of my experience is, I think I really have questions. I have questions about what devotion means. It seems to me like there's this sense of love, and a sense of worship, and also like on a side that doesn't feel so free to me, and I think this is where the biggest part of my question is. Like, I've often had the word devotion sort of, or it has in some ways become associated with like an obligation, and there is a side of that does seem uplifting to me, which is sort of like answering the call of the divine, like the call of the divine would move me to action, and there's a way that seems like devotion, and then there's also, I think, sort of like that can be sort of, that there can be this sort of heavy obligation sense there too. In terms of the love kind of aspect, it seems like there's like in my experience, like a sort of enrapturing or an enrapturement, if that's, if I can create such a word, of like being in natural places, being sort of overcome by beauty or awe in the world, which, that seems like this sort of worshipful, enraptured devotions. And then, on that other part, I have questions of discernment, like how to discern what's devotion and what's not. We use the word devotion to a cause. So it seems like there's a real art element in it. Yeah. So I guess that's a little bit mixed experience and question. But that's what occurs to me to say at the moment.
It's Amy. For me, there's this sense of being carried by something underneath everything else that I can rely on. And I feel some kind of devotion to that thing that I call divine flow, that I think is what people mean when they say God or Goddess or Great Mystery. I have a lot of trouble with the languaging side of this, with all the bloodshed about arguments about what God is and isn't. So I can just only really say what's my experience, which is this thing that I feel is what carries me through life. I'm devoted to that. And that thing helps me be a better person. And at the same time, it's completely impersonal. And at the same time, it seems to be absolutely aware of every personal detail of me, if that makes any sense. And sometimes it's scary because it's so impersonal, and I'd rather be carried or held by a human being or comforted by a human being. But human beings aren't always up to that, whereas this thing is always up for that. And I'm devoted to it because it seems like it does for other people what it does for me. And that just seems to be like an unqualified good thing. So this might sound silly, but I think that's really it in a nutshell for me. I'm done.
Well, this is Diane, and I like what you've both shared in terms of the devotion and what it is and how it shows up for each of you. And I think for me, it's actually there's that big piece of love that's in there that just maybe is that piece that is a part of carrying and is just, like you were saying, Amy, this knowing and intelligent piece that is just, that's always there. And that I find not only does it carry, but it carries me toward that more. Like it carries me to continue to find that and continue to find ways to be in that thing that is life-giving and just divinity expressed, just that divine spark. That's what I have to say at the moment.
Well, I guess it's my turn, or space for me to offer, since there's just four of us tonight. I've had basically a week to try to figure out, well, what am I going to say tonight? And oftentimes there's just kind of a real sense in advance of kind of a plan of what to offer, and tonight there just doesn't seem to be any plan. Nothing came in the space of a week of how to organize, how to be logical and rational about something like this. So what occurs to me is just referencing back to the passage that I quoted to begin our call, earlier in our call, where Vivekananda differentiates between Bhakti and Parabhakti. Just kind of regular Bhakti that's gone this side before, how should we say, illumination or communion or whatever, and then on the other side of illumination or communion, the Parabhakti, where there's in some sense this absolute sense of just living every moment in the divine. And I must confess that I'm not over the line yet, or I'm still on the human or the less than enlightened side of communion. And that's just as it should be, because as it turns out, in terms of the rays and esoteric psychology, that's one way of kind of interpreting the human condition and the people who are here on planet Earth in this lifetime. Because if you're familiar with the ray typology, the way of understanding human characterology by the rays, there are 7 rays, and at least the first 3 of them can be what's considered the ray of the soul. The ray of the soul is that ray either of will, of emotion, or of what amounts to mind. And the ray of the soul never changes through the entire individuation of that particular soul. But then there's the ray of the personality, which changes from lifetime to lifetime, and it just so happens that my ray for this lifetime is devotion. And where I'm at now in the place of devotion is a place of what I could call a longing, a great longing for communion. I've read deeply in the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and other places, even within the Christian tradition and other mystical traditions, and the poetry of Rumi and others of the mystical poets. And can understand in a sense that real devotion is in some sense, for me at least, connected and communing with the divine. For instance, to see the divine in all and to see all in the divine. that there's no differentiation between anything, that it's all the divine immanent. And that seems to me where I'm at now, the true experience of devotion. And I'm just not in that place. But somehow or other in the last 20 years or so, I've kind of discovered that longing to be in that place. And I can kind of sketch out a couple other things, but I don't know if it's important to do that, because in some sense they're my own mind constructs of what it would look like, what it's going to feel like in that center at center, and I just don't know what it's going to be like. And I guess we'll see. So in some sense I'm in an analogous place perhaps to topsoil and having questions. I don't know what it looks like. And don't really know, and once I get there, I'll send you a postcard and let you tell her if I'm able to. Okay, well, that's what I would offer at this time and place about devotion.
Can I say something?
Oh, of course, we have that kind of counsel tonight.
Yeah. I'm curious if it is your experience when you're in flow, alignment, and connection space in the ballroom.
Yes.
Do you feel like you're in the thing that you're looking for when you're in that place? Because I feel like when I'm in that place, when I do flow alignment, I have the experience that you said you're looking for. I can easily not have that experience when I'm not in the flow alignment connection ballroom consciously, but I can fairly well rely upon that if I go to the flow alignment connection ballroom and I'm there to serve someone or something, I will have that experience that you said. And I'm curious, is that your experience too?
So I guess I'm obliged to say that in general I'm still on this side. I think I've had intimations of Bhakti, and I've had intimations at least 4 nameable times. And those 4 times are when I taught pace twice and when I taught flow alignment twice. That invites space of connection. And I remember saying to the students in the class, watching their sessions when they work with one another, it reminds me that the love of God is real.
Yeah.
That the divine is real here on planet Earth, when there's a communion between those people. That connection, those communions. And yes, 4 times it reminds me that it's real.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time it's it's more like the hell worlds than Bhakti.
Oh.
But I also kind of understand that it's in the divine working itself, experiencing itself, processing itself, and in and through me. And I, too, have that sense of that transpersonal impersonality, like you.
There's 28 minutes left.
I would like to talk about when fear takes me. Can we talk about that?
As I think I suggested earlier, that the initial 3 questions were places to start, and we'll just see where it takes it. So, of course,
okay.
Please.
Okay. I'm curious if anybody else has this experience, which is I really feel this presence of God carrying me, like, a lot. I still go into a tizzy now and then. And I'd say I obsess and I'm worried about small, petty things on a fairly regular basis. But it's almost like that surface stuff, and underneath, I'm really aware of this deep thing carrying me. But, okay, and, before I get to the but, and I have a very strong belief that when I die, I'll join with the thing that's carrying me. And while I might have some discomfort during the physical deathing process, if it's involved with a long, slow illness instead of a quick, acute, gunshot or car crash or whatever the agency is going to be that lets me leave my body and go back to this other thing, I'm not averse to that happening, and I haven't been averse to that happening for a very long time. And yet, at night, when I'm going to sleep and when I am asleep, when I'm transitioning from daytime awareness into the place that I go at night, which I experience as being free of my physical body and living many parallel lives in which most of them I'm teaching and transmitting. Getting from here to there, sometimes it's really bumpy, and it's like the transition is not unlike when you're riding on an airplane and there's turbulence, and it's like jarring, and then the bottom drops out, and you have that sense of falling. And what happens is I wake up startled from that falling and anxious, and then I'm like, oh, well, am I dead yet? Oh, I'm not dead yet. I'm still here. Okay. All right, I need to calm down and just go back to sleep. Whatever the thing is I do that I call sleep. And, Tiny, go lie down. Yeah. He always picks these times to make noise into the phone. It's unbelievable. So I think it's really interesting that this thing is like so visceral, and it's frightening, the sense of falling into it, and the sense of it might be my moment of death. And then every time it's not my moment of death, and I'm back awake, I don't in that moment feel carried as I imagine I will when I actually die. And I don't in that moment, maybe because I'm not dying, have that sense of being like, on a conveyor belt right into this thing of God that I feel carrying me, that causes me this devotion. And I'm curious. I talked to Frank one time about this, Frank Jatambo, and he had the same experience. He was like, yes, I've been having that too. And this was years ago. And it was right around the time it started that I talked to Frank about it. I'm curious. Do any of you ever have this happen? And how does this square for you, or not square for you, with what we've been talking about with devotion to God?
Do you mean the part where you're falling and it's startling?
Well, it's not a sense of being carried. It's like bumpy, and it's really different from this sense of being held by God and in the flow with God. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, do you guys feel this ever? Does it happen to you at night? How I have a hard time reconciling, like what I would call my rock-solid faith in God. Because I really, really trust God. I really trust that flow. I believe it has it all covered. And although I don't understand everything that's going on, and I'm rattled by a lot of stuff that's going on, I believe that it does know what's going on and that it's on it. It's taking care of things. It's all unfolding correctly. And at the same time, there's this place where I really don't feel supported, where every night, like several times a night, this rough thing happens.
And
I'm just curious.
The rough thing is where you have that sense of falling and there's nothing under there. And it wakes you up. I don't have it every night, but I've had it many times. And, you know, I'm in some dream state, and that's what happens. And it wakes me up, and I think, wow. And then that's it, and I go back to sleep. So my view isn't. It's very startling because it is this falling thing, and there's nothing under there. Or I've been in a dream and I'm walking, and then there's nothing, and you know, or you trip or something, and then it awakens me. But I don't have the view of it being bumpy. I just think, wow, that's really strong and interesting. And I don't know what it is, and then I just go back to sleep. It's startling, and there's an element of fear sometimes because it's so startling, and there's just nothing there, and then it's over.
I guess I resonate with fear, with the idea of fear. I've certainly woken up and had this, you know, like fear itself feels jagged to me. Like that experience, like it feels like some like you know, kind of anxious fear thing. I'm not sure about the nothingness. I mean, I think sometimes when I experience fear, it's this contraction, and I'm afraid of nothingness. But I don't know that that's ever been my experience, that I'm perceiving that there is nothing there. More that I'm afraid that there isn't something there. So, you know, that may be a different experience, or it may be related. I really don't know. But those are my thoughts on that question for the moment. In the bigger question of devotion, I was drawn to say some more. I was just looking in the online etymological dictionary, and the etymology of devotion has to do with vows and like consecration. You know, it seems like there's this. It seems, you know, and so there seems like there's this saying yes to something. I sort of thought, you know, I think I said something like that in my earlier sharing, too, and you know, like so, like I keep finding myself being drawn to this part about that, you know, like there is something calling forth or carrying, but then there's also my saying yes to it. And it seems like speaking of fear, it seems like fear could be a reason that I would withhold that yes and not, because I don't think as humans, devotion doesn't seem like it's necessarily a given. Especially not devotion to the divine, but maybe it is. Maybe in some ways we're all devoted to some experience of the divine or some pathway to the divine, and there's no way around it, and that looks different for everybody. But that maybe at some level that's what motivates everything. And then there are levels where it seems like people are maybe resisting, what might look like the call of the divine, staying in fear, staying in smallness. There are places where I see myself doing that as well. So I'm curious. I'm curious if you guys see a similar thing about saying yes to the divine as part of devotion, resistance to that, or not resistance to that, like wholeheartedness about that. And it seems like, Thomas, the part of that quote you shared, to get to that super state, it seems like it's a letting go of resistance to saying yes, like having a more and more wholehearted yes, a more full yes.
There's 15 minutes left.
Yeah, I'm really resonating with what you're saying, Topso, myself. It's Amy again, and that's what's really interesting to me is that the place I don't feel carried and the place I don't feel devotion is where I've derailed from being carried, from saying yes and going along with this flow. And it's happening in a place, in a part of me that I'm not conscious of. It's an unconscious thing. I don't, it happens often enough. It's like a bad smell coming back or a broken record, but I haven't got the hang yet of how to get out of it by saying yes. Like, it's exactly what you're saying. And I love the thing about devotion and vow because that just really resonates. It really makes sense to me that a lot of times things are really awful, hellish on the surface. But if I say yes, if I say, I know you're there, I just have to get to you. I have to join you, and then it's all right. I have to organize myself to get in that place. That's like the saying yes, and then it carries me again. Like I have a sense of being carried. I think it carries me all the time, but I don't always have a sense of it carrying me. And it's very disturbing to me when I'm looking for that sense of being carried and I'm not finding it. I'm finding instead nothing. And I don't mean a good nothing. I mean a bad nothing or a falling or a dissonant, disruptive experience where what I'm looking for is that security and that smoothness and that power that I recognize as being so much greater and that I can trust. I'm done.
Yeah, what you just said right there really resonated with me about trust. That I can trust. it seems like there is a vulnerability. There is an extending ourselves about, I've heard this phrase, in a developmental context, but like saying yes is like signing a blank check. We don't know what it's going to call for from us, and like there's an edge of our trust. And sometimes we hit the edge of that trust, and then like beyond that, like we're not yet trusting, but it seems like trust can be developed. And so that just really resonated with me when you said that, like finding that edge of like, oh wait, I'm here, I don't feel supported, I'm not trusting. And so maybe that edge of trust has something to do with whether we can feel the support or not. I really don't know. I'm just posing that as a question, as like a place of exploration. But it's just resonating with me that there is sort of like this vulnerability of the blank check. I'm not sure how else to say it other than to repeat myself that way.
On the news this evening, there was, interestingly, two things about, I guess, love and support with preemies in the hospital, like babies that are only a pound or 2 pounds anyway, really in need of support. And they're finding that when they're sung to, just, various lullabies and stuff, that their time in the hospital is lessened, that they eat better, that generally their responses are just better from that thing that is there carrying them, to use that phrase, which is love through the voice, through the song, the comfort, because they're all wired up to all these machines and they're hearing those beeps and the hums and, the whole thing that is another way of supporting them that is maybe the rougher part that is there to support them. But there's this human love, voice that is that part that helps to carry them. And they did and then interestingly, they're now allowing pets, dogs and cats, into the hospital after they've been, thoroughly examined themselves, that they don't carry any disease for people. But that healing process helps. So it's just so interesting because it's kind of like those are, a voice and animals that are just there with that, also that carrying element and love, and how it's there to support and to carry and move healing. And so it's sort of just, that's what's come to mind for me. And there's about 7 minutes left.
Does anyone have anything else they'd like to offer before we begin the closing process? I'll take that silence as a no. So why don't we do a checkout? Why don't we go around our little circle and maybe you could offer what stays in your heart in your mind as we close our circle this evening. So to check out.
Amy, my checkout is I feel gratitude for community with you all and the opportunity to talk about these things that are so close to my heart with other like-minded and interested people. Thank you.
Thomas here. I too am grateful for that sense of communion and talking about stuff that's not often talked about. I'm complete.
Topsoil here, and that gratitude was the first thing that came to mind for me as well. I feel somebody fell off. Gratitude for the richness of the energy and the sharing. It seems like we've generated and opened up a really lovely space together, and I find myself interested in the exploration of the ideas and the sharing and exploration, mutual exploration. And thank you.
Diane, are you still with us?
Yes. So I guess it's Amy, maybe dropped off. I also feel a gratitude to speak into the mystery and the divinity and the exploration together. Thank you.
Are you back, Amy?
I am. I didn't get to hear yours and Diane's, but I'll just bask in the glow of your energy.
Okay. So thank you for joining us in this Spirit Gathering teleconference. This call will be archived as an MP3 at www.tzaddi.org. Telephone access to the recording of this call is available until next month's call. For playback, dial 712-432-1085, and the access code is 990322 and the pound sign. And we hope you'll join us for our next Spirit Gathering call on July 16th. These calls are offered by Tzaddi, a spiritual educational organization founded in California in 1964. Tzaddi welcomes, nurtures, and supports people in celebrating and more directly experiencing their relationship with the loving presence of the divine. We'll close now with a thanks and a blessing. Thanks to the Tzaddi founders, Amy Keyes and Dorothy Blackmere, who started our metaphysical organization. Thanks to all of you who have been a part of our community tonight. And thanks to the divine, which supports us always, even when we and I am not aware of it. And so, may the divine bless you and keep you. May the divine make its face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the divine uplift its countenance within you and give you peace. Thanks again, and good night.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye. Still there, Amy?